Welcome to Total Network Operations. We're on the road at AutoCon 3 in Prague in the Czech Republic, May 2025. We have another wonderful special guest with us, Mahesh Jethanandani. Thank you for being here today, Mahesh. We're going to talk about what's happening in the IETF and IEB regarding feedback on network management systems and operations. And let me not steal thunder from you, Mahesh. Why don't you give us a little bit of your background and how you got all the way into the role you're in today?
All right. First of all, thank you, Scott, for inviting me to your Ops podcast. And congratulations for successfully completing AutoCon 3. I've been to every one of them, and I'm just amazed by the growth that the organization has seen. So thanks for successful completion.
Thank you. It's we really appreciate it. And we'll wrap back around to that at some point in the conversation.
All right. So a little bit of background on what I do, what I am. I am a distinguished engineer at Arrcus, and I'm responsible for all of management and operations aspects of the device.
Okay.
Basically, what that means is anything in and out of the box is my responsibility.
Okay.
Arrcus, as some of you may know, is a network operating systems vendor. We offer a NOS for white box hardware.
Yep.
My other hat that I wear in something that you referred to is that I'm also the area director in IETF for all of Ops.
Okay.
Ops, which consists of management and operations. I manage the management aspect of Ops. Therefore, protocols definitions such as NETCONF, RESTCONF, as well as the language Yang is something that falls under my purview.
So just an easy job, right? I'm sure it doesn't keep you up at night at all.
Absolutely, I sleep like a baby. No, it is one of the most very active areas within IETF. Certainly, routing is another area that is very, very active, but Ops is equally important. And we have working groups that span from green, as the name suggests, is devoted entirely to energy management in the network, to IV, which is an inventory management working group responsible for inventory management of the network, right, defining the inventory management of the network, to network management operations working group that is responsible for all of understanding what operator problems are and trying to decide where some of that work is going to happen.
Let's just tease on that a little bit. This is something that is different from what many people associate with, protocol definition within the IETF context, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Most of IETF, when you think of their working groups, is devoted to protocol definitions,
right,
around. NMOP, in that sense, is different, and it was done primarily to address the challenge of getting input from operators. So we established this working group with the idea that operators can walk in with their problem statement, tell us what it is, and then the working group decides where some of that work or a solution can be developed within IETF.
So not to fast forward to the end of the episode, but so people aren't wondering, if you have someone listening who is a network operator of any type, what is the best way to provide feedback into the processes that you're going to describe to us here?
Right. Certainly, NMOP working group is a great place to start.
Okay.
If you are starting off new and you just have a problem statement to talk about. But there are other working groups that, like the Ops working group. It's a catch-all kind of working group that looks at all operational issues that operators face, and will take in work that may not belong anywhere else.
Okay.
So that would be another place. Now, as far as if you're an operator walking in and trying to understand, the best way to understand any working group within IETF is to really look at the work that is being conducted.
Okay.
All this information is public. If you search for operations working group within IETF, follow the links. Each one will describe what is the charter of that working group, what are some of the work that it is doing currently, and there are documents that kind of back that up.
Okay.
So,
we'll remind folks before we end today on how to do that. So I distracted you from talking about the relationship between this organization, this working group. Can you kind of paint the picture of how it fits with IAB and IETF?
absolutely. What I essentially talked about till now was mostly what IETF does, which is defining protocols and specifications around those protocols. Where IAB comes into the picture is it's the Internet Architecture Board.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of the overseer of all the work that happens in IETF and sets the direction for IETF in terms of architecture and guidance where it should be focusing on.
Sure.
And the reason why, for example, this particular workshop and the focus that came about was at the behest, at a request that I made to IAB to say, where are we with network management? What are some of the problem statements that we need to address? And therefore, I requested IAB to have this workshop. And there's a little more history that I can get into where we had a workshop back in 2002, a very similar workshop.
Yeah, go there now. Let's start at the beginning. Yep.
Okay. All right. So back in 2002, the Internet Architecture Board conducted the first workshop around network management.
Okay.
And remember, those are the days of CLI and SNMP.
Oh, they're turned off in most networks now, right? I don't think anybody uses SNMP anymore for sure.
Well, why would they, right? Really to understand what are some of the requirements and recommendations from the network operators.
Right.
So the result of that workshop was a set of 14 requirements and 11 recommendations. So really the idea was that the IETF was then going to go and look at those recommendations, and that resulted in protocol definitions such as NETCONF, RESTCONF, and of course the language Yang. Fast forward, the most recent workshop back in December was to kind of look back as well as look forward to see where are we currently in with those set of requirements.
A lot has changed and a lot has not.
Exactly. So, and to really look at what has worked for the community, and more importantly, what has not worked. It was really to see what should we be focusing on for the next 20 years, as an example, to enable forums like AutoCon to focus on what are some of the needs for network automation. And where are we failing in providing the necessary protocols or support?
Right.
So that the basis of where this whole workshop in December came about.
And you fed input from multiple other, like you collected some information back at AutoCon 2. I know you had side meetings with NANOG and other organizations, right? Can you talk about that structure and doing that legwork and how that got brought into your December 24 workshop?
Yeah, thanks. The reason that IAB, first of all, did this whole outreach effort was because IETF has been seeing a decline in operators' participation. But operators' input, it is important for whatever work we do.
Seems like it would be critical.
Absolutely.
And why wouldn't an operator of any kind not want to take advantage of an opportunity to provide their feedback?
Yeah. And to make it easier, I think the idea of the outreach effort was to go where the operators collect.
Sure.
Right. And we were more than happy to get out, go to these get-togethers, and really inform the operators not only of the workshop, but really get them to participate in it by showing, by presenting a position paper or talking about an area of interest. So that was just part of the effort. The other was to try to do a survey before the workshop, try to get as much input as we could about some of the same topics that we were going to cover in the workshop itself. But to get them early on so we knew what we were looking at when the workshop rolled around. So,
did you see differences in what the different regional entities brought you, or NAF is unique in that we're not necessarily regional, but we have a different bent, in terms of being focused on network automation. What are some of the things you saw out of the localized meetings?
Absolutely. I think the feedback that we got was very different, say, from AutoCon, which is more automation focused, and their needs were entirely around management. But you had organizations like LACNIC.
Latin America, correct?
Yeah, Latin America Network Information Center. I think
RIPE is for Europe. Yeah.
Just like you have RIPE for Europe, you have something called LACNIC in Latin America that is focused on operators' requirements for that area. You'd be amazed by the difference of what are pressing problems for an operator in Latin America versus a U.S. operator or an operator in Europe, because they are even further behind.
Sure.
And they tend to be smaller, and their problem statements tend to be very different. And that's just to say that we have to be cognizant of the fact that it's not one solution that fits all these operators. So we have to try to keep them in mind as we try to standardize on a solution.
Okay.
So just to conclude on that, I think so we had the workshop, and we'll talk a little bit about what some of the conclusions were from that workshop. Really, our effort doesn't stop there. And the idea is that we want to continue this outreach effort, post talking about what we thought we understood from the operators, and really to keep this engagement going.
Mm-hmm. Well, so from the initial efforts into the December 24 workshop, what have you uncovered? You don't need to make any blanket statements. You can be as detailed as you'd like. I know we don't have slides here since we're audio only, but what are people reporting?
Right. So let me talk a little bit about how the workshop was organized, and then we can get into the conclusions kind of set. So it was a 3-day workshop, and we had participation from not only network operators of ISPs and telco providers, but also data center operators.
Right. Really important part of the ecosystem right now with this massive growth.
Exactly. And even hypercloud providers.
I was able to listen in half of the time. I was not, unfortunately, fully engaged, but I appreciated the opportunity to take in what I took.
Right. And I think you'll find some of the summary that I'll present today, and there is also a document that kind of backs it up. So there's plenty of information out there if you want to go and look at. And then you had, of course, the vendor community. You had people from my company, Arrcus, also participate in that particular workshop, right? So it was a 3-day workshop, and the idea was we split it into 3 days. The first day focusing on the past, looking at what was defined way back in 2002 from a requirements perspective. Where are we kind of getting a feel of what have we achieved, what we have not been able to achieve.
Sure.
The second day was more focused on what is the present, what are the current set of problems that we need to be looking at. And of course, the third day was more devoted to what should we be looking forward to, what are some of the action items we need to take away from this workshop to focus on. So we'll talk about those also. So in terms of the conclusion, say, from the past, there was general consensus that management protocols like NETCONF, RESTCONF, and of course, and now another one called CoreConf, have been deployed in the industry.
Okay.
At least there's an effort to try to deploy them in the industry. The fact that Yang as a data modeling language has been recognized in the industry. One area that repeatedly got highlighted during the workshop was the ease of use.
Mm-hmm.
I do not think we have made it easy for the operators to deploy a complete solution, whether it is because of lack of tools or it is the participation in the open source community
Sure.
to develop some of the tools and help the solutions in general. So speed and performance is definitely another issue that kept coming up when it comes to programmatic interface, because you're talking about a machine-to-machine interface at this point, and certainly speed and performance becomes important.
Right. No rate limiting on that REST interface. Right.
Exactly. Right. And you don't want to be waiting for 5 minutes for a certain operation to complete just because that's how it was done in the past.
Yeah. Or certain, invoking operations on a network element and causing issues because something is taking up processing cycles on that routing engine, on that, the control plane.
Exactly. Right. Another paper that was presented was moving from device level modeling to what we call service level modeling.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean most providers are really interested in providing solutions, offering solutions to their customers.
Sure.
They want to offer their services to their customers. They're more interested in what will enable them to do that.
Right.
And to that sense, how does the service get decomposed at the device level is almost not a problem statement they want to deal with.
Let me give I'll try a very practical example of this from my history, and you tell me if I'm correct. From my Juniper history, I was very device focused. This port, this VLAN, this DLCI. Yes, I just dated myself. The constructs on the router. And then as I got exposed to Nokia, they even named their operating system differently, the Service Router Operating System, SROS, not Scott Robon, OS. And you looked at things more in terms of this VRF or this pseudo wire. Mm-hmm. Not that I can't look at those things in Junos, but the perspective was different from the device constructs versus the service constructs.
Right.
Am I in the right neighborhood, or is there more to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if you really think about why did this whole VRF concept come about?
Sure.
Right.
Overlapping IP addresses. No.
It is really to be able to isolate one customer's traffic from another, right? If you think about it, it's
a virtual machine on a router, essentially.
Exactly, right? What you're trying to make sure is that I don't have to buy a box for every customer that I want to support. I should be able to support multiple customers using a single device.
Yep.
So this whole idea of having a VRF and having services for that particular customer be constrained within that VRF is a natural outcome of of a network.
Yep.
Right. It's very, very practical way to deal with how we scale the network solutions. So it's these kind of problem statements that we really need to be focusing on.
Right. And I think the service level view, is that better aligned with the hyperscaler view in terms of, I don't care, where in AWS my service is running. Exactly. I want the service to be available.
Exactly.
And I know I just made a pretty big leap there, but you nodded at me.
Yes.
So I'm again, we're okay in this neighborhood.
Exactly, right. Today I am in Prague and I need access to my resources much the same way I would when I'm back home in the Bay Area.
Regardless of geographical boundaries.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what something AWS has been able to do.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. You don't have to say, now that I'm in Prague, I somehow need to VPN back into the Bay Area to be able to access some of those same services. No, that's not necessarily. The network should be transparent to you in terms of offering that service.
Yep.
Yeah. So moving on from that, as far as the present is concerned, I think one of the messages conveyed by the folks involved in OpenConfig was to develop models along with the protocols themselves and not really do this as an afterthought.
Okay.
till now it has been, protocol definitions are separate and somehow modeling will follow. No, I think the two need to go hand in hand, because you really can't just think about how the protocol will get deployed and not think about how you're going to manage.
Sure.
Right. So that was certainly one lesson that we took away from that workshop. The other lesson I think that OpenConfig has taught all of us is that you don't have to have a perfect model in place day one. I know it makes the churn, handling those churns is difficult.
Sure.
But maybe iterating over the model lends you to fixing or preventing some of those mistakes sooner than waiting till a perfect model is written, only to find that it's not useful.
Right. Yeah, and there's always changes and added features to every protocol and every service. So like, I don't think there's any way we could realistically say we'll get it all right out of the gate. Right. Mm-hmm. So like, that seems like a very practical assumption what you just stated.
Exactly.
I want to ask you one step back. So this need to develop models concurrently with protocol development.
Mm-hmm.
That's great for new protocols. There's still a lot of catch up to do for things that are already in the wild. So
yeah, and I'm making a plug for my company. I think we were somehow lucky that by the time we were ready to write our first line of code
sure.
for what we were trying to do, we already had models.
Right.
We had, of course, OpenConfig models. We had IETF models. We chose to go with OpenConfig because they were somehow a little more complete at that point.
Okay.
And our choice at that time was to say we are a model-first company.
Right.
Meaning even our CLIs are not written by hand. They are generated from the models that OpenConfig has published. We do have our own set of models, but all it means is that your look and feel, whether it's on the CLI or it's through this API interface that comes with NETCONF and RESTCONF, is the same. So you as an operator will not see a difference between the two. Therefore, I think, and that I want to kind of emphasize, because from a customer perspective, having that universal interface or the look and feel being exactly the same is kind of important for how we achieve automation.
Okay. Yeah, reduce the number of snowflakes.
Yep. Exactly. And the same could be said for telemetry. I think we have had the Yang push, what we call Yang push in IETF team, take the minimum viable approach to try to solve the telemetry. It's trying to say that what is the minimum solution that a customer is really looking for from a telemetry or monitoring perspective, and try to address that and then really boil the ocean.
Right.
And finally, as far as looking forward, most of the focus was on trying to simplify the deployment scenario. There was a discussion around using knowledge graphs as a way to solve the complexity of data that we're gathering from different sources.
Okay.
Sure, AI is out there and is playing a fairly important role. We wanted to have all options on the table and trying to figure out how to deal with data. We heard so much about data in AutoCon the last 3 days, and I think it's important.
Yep.
But it's really synthesizing that data that is going to become more and more important as we go forward.
So that's similarly, that hit me this week in that, we've always kind of talked about the source of truth discussion, which is inherently, there's going to be a database structure of, what is my inventory of devices, authoritative configuration information, and related info look like. And in some of the other conversations on this podcast, I'll reference one for Megaport.
Yes.
That hasn't published as of this recording, but it will come out in June. And, they're a provider that's kind of known or thought of for being automation first. But in that conversation, the principal engineer I spoke with basically talked about them getting the data model taken care of first. And network engineers don't want to be bothered with that. Are you kidding me,
Absolutely.
Mahesh? So, maybe I'll give you a chance to make a little bit of a case for that here. I also think it's raising its head with, the craze around AI and agentic AI. I think as enterprises start dealing with AI issues, they're finding they have their own data quality problems.
Mhm.
So this is not just subject to network. It's not just an issue with network infrastructure. But so why should I care about having the right data structures? Tell me.
Right. Imagine trying to work in a world without really understanding what the data is about.
Sure.
Think about the days when you typed something on the CLI and you got back an output.
Right.
And you're trying to parse and understand, what does this output even mean?
Right.
Right. How do you correlate that value of 80 against, is it megabits per second? Is it number of bits? Is it, what does that whole figure actually mean? So the fact that somebody had to have a CCIE or some other background to really understand that output of CLI tells you that I don't think so we were paying enough attention to defining that data.
Sure.
And I think that's where the whole data modeling and the reason why that is important comes in, and why today we talk about databases and trying to tag every piece of data and understand what it really means.
Now, is it fair to take that back to SNMP MIBs? Those are data structures.
Absolutely.
And so we've known for decades that there needs to be structure to information. I think part of the problem there has been anybody can go write an enterprise MIB that's has one set of parameters on operating system X and another on operating system Y and another on operating system Z. And that, I think, causes some of the splay that we're seeing.
Right. And SNMP has had that problem. And to a certain extent, I will be the first one to admit that even today's models developed in Yang have some of the same problem.
Why do you think that is?
So, in fact, it was one of the topics that kept coming back in the workshop was, why is it that we have not been able to standardize on a set of models?
Right.
Some of that, you have to understand that all these vendors are in the business of trying to make money.
Sure.
And they're there because they want to differentiate themselves from their competition. And they want to offer features, capabilities that the industry doesn't even know or has bothered to model.
Right.
So what happens at that point is the vendor says, am I going to wait for another 2 years for someone to write a model for this?
Right.
Or am I going to write one of my own?
Right.
So even within Arrcus, for example, when we started, 80% of our models were open config models and maybe 20% were vendor-specific models. Today, I think the picture is just the reverse.
Okay. Interesting.
It's because open config has not kept up with the rich feature set that all the new protocols and solutions have brought, where we had to pretty much say, okay, we are not going to wait for open config to define this. We're going to define our own. That unfortunately has led to this problem of every vendor publishing their own set of models and not really supporting a set of standardized models.
Well, there is an interesting tension there, right? Where for, having been on the vendor side, you tend to do what your customers are asking for.
Exactly.
So if a customer says, I would love to go with this model approach, but it's not doing what I need, and a network element provider in their operating system can solve that customer's need or an aggregated need, getting ahead of the standards bodies, we want room for that innovation.
You have to pretty much, if that company is to survive, it has to get ahead of waiting for someone to define it for them.
Right.
That is not to say that that problem doesn't exist. And I think we have to admit that we may never be able to solve that particular problem. So what I would suggest actually at this point is that maybe what we are looking at is an abstraction layer, something that abstracts out the device-specific capabilities and provides a uniform interface at that abstract level rather than doing that at the device level.
Okay.
It's not the best solution, but I think it's one way to move forward on this.
Is there an active proposal for that? What's the status of that thought?
That's something is my takeaway from AutoCon, this particular AutoCon, and it's something I'm going to take back to the community in IETF to say, is there something we can develop or help the community develop that abstract layer?
Well, you can certainly count on the Network Automation Forum community if you want other input on that. We have a lot of people who are not shy. Be happy to give you other ideas. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how that develops for you. So
okay. Yeah, I'll look forward to any input from this body.
Very good. Well, so in terms of conclusions, takeaways, what are the biggest things that you're walking away from the collection of input from the operators? Like what's really hitting you from those inputs?
Right. So the key takeaways from the workshop essentially can be broken down into 4 categories. There are takeaways in terms of the ecosystem. There's something to be said about protocols, modeling, of course, that we just mentioned, and of course, overall standardization. Within the ecosystem, I think ease of use was top of mind for everyone. And I think that is what has prevented the move from CLI and SNMP into a more programmatic interface.
Everybody, the CLI ease of use is pretty high, especially people who've been spending their lives in certification programs around different CLIs. Yep.
Right. So certainly offering APIs and the documentation that explains those APIs, I think will go a long way towards enabling operators move to a more programmable interface. Then you have, of course, within the protocol, while NETCONF, RESTCONF is considered the default protocol of choice, it is not used for monitoring, very surprisingly. We have had other people present a solution. So I think clearly IETF has recognized and is working on something called a Yang push capability.
Yeah, I read about that. Yeah.
Right. So move away from this whole polling mechanism that SNMP had to try to more emphasize the idea of a push.
Sure.
Push the data out.
Change of state, report.
Exactly. Yeah. I think on change is one of the key requirements that has come out to say, let me know as soon as you can on a certain change. Now, from a modeling perspective, of course, while there's no disputing the dominance of Yang as the modeling language of choice, the lack of standardized models that we just talked about is definitely hurting the industry. And maybe, as I said, the focus is to move it rather than focus too much on trying to get that standardized model, is to maybe look at abstraction, as I just suggested. Finally, in terms of standardization, more agile approach to developing and publishing these models was emphasized. At the same time, the model needs to be cognizant of scale and performance when you're actually iterating through this model. So certainly those were some of the key takeaways. There were many more, and they are kind of documented in the document that was written as a report for the workshop.
I'll make sure that I have the right links for show notes, to make it easy for people to go look. That agility issue. So that's a challenge, right? Because whenever you have multi-vendor cooperation, especially when different vendors are trying to get an edge on certain things, I imagine getting to agility, as an industry is a lot harder than being agile as an individual supplier.
Yeah, it is. As an industry, it is trying to, come to an agreement, trying to take every input possible, trying to agree on that's a consensus-based process that IETF follows is harder than it seems, because everyone has their interest in mind and they want to make sure that they are being heard.
Is there any thought to, and this is a slogan, so maybe it's not fair to say this, but back to, IETF origins, rough consensus in running code. Does that hold any weight today? And does that attract anybody to, how do we get to an 80% solution that we can start iterating on to maybe invoke some of that agility?
Right. And I think there is certain value to that slogan. I think that's what made IETF successful. Correct. Was the fact that people were actually writing code and that you could say, yeah, I've done this and it actually works, or I've written it, but these are sort of problems we might need to still address before we approve this. So we try to emphasize even today running code. In fact, one of my more recent drafts in IETF, I try to get some university students involved in trying to implement the draft, because the value of learning from that actual implementation is way more than you can ever think of by just writing a document.
Absolutely. On an adjacent idea, we would love to do some hackathon activity in future AutoCon events with open source in mind, using hackathon events to let people actually try finding a project and contributing to it. Again, having implementation experience versus just, thinking about it from a draft perspective. So.
Right. And I think AutoCon, whether it's a hackathon or it's a workshop, I think can really play a key role in trying to enable that fostering of writing code, testing it out, not just in your own environment, but in general working with on the attendees at the different devices that are being brought to the table from. So I think in terms of really a solution perspective, one thing that I do want to at least briefly talk about is what are some of the next steps we should.
Don't worry, we were going there right now. So
I'm sorry for preempting you from that.
We're of one mind. Excellent.
So we have started to pick up some of the work from that particular workshop and try to address them in IETF. Take, for example, the NMOP working group, and it held an interim meeting recently on the whole question of knowledge graphs and trying to see if that is going to be able to solve the problem of the data lake that we have created for all of networking data that is being spewed out by devices. Right? So
blessing and a curse, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And similarly, the operations or the ops group is trying to address the question of tooling. We heard about tooling a lot, both in AutoCon as well back in the workshop. And it's in the vein of trying to ease the ease of use and trying to solve the problem of API that we are looking at a Yang to API capability that is by default available for anyone to use, and to make sure that we are accompanying documentation along with it for people to use. So certainly the listeners of this podcast can look forward to some of that activity picking up in IETF.
If people want to contribute, what are some concrete things that you're looking for that people could still provide input on?
Yeah, so I think in terms of actual help from the community, there are a lot of areas, but I think if I had to really choose one, that people in AutoCon or the open source community would be interested and people who subscribe to this particular podcast, is the area of creating an open source community.
Okay.
For collaboration and sharing of ideas that enable automation. We need the community's help in identifying what kind of tools have helped them in the past, what kind of tools can help them going forward.
Sure.
Looking for templates or solution packages that enable a small operator that doesn't quite have all the resources to be able to bootstrap themselves.
Sure.
And ITF can certainly, and even to a certain extent, I would say even AutoCon, as you mentioned, with having a hackathon, could certainly help by hosting some of those events.
Sure.
As part of the conference. So and I can say that from my own company's perspective, we would be willing to share and provide virtual solutions for our operating system that people can use to test the programmability and
Sure.
test out their solutions. So, I'm more than happy to work with you and Chris to try to see how we can pitch in.
Well, you just signed yourself up. We will come back to you on that without any issue. Any other specific asks to the community in general, and not just NAF, but from operators of all kinds? We often tend to think of network operators as, the large carriers, but even regional and other service providers. But I will also put the, small, medium, and even large enterprise. Those are also network operators.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a revenue generating network operation, but it's still an essential business function that involves running the network. Like
Right.
what do you want from different kinds of operators?
Right. So it's an interesting question that you brought up, because I had a similar discussion with Claudia, and
Claudia De Luna, who
Yes.
gave an opening keynote here in Prague. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. So Claudia and I were talking about exactly that we have single or a small operational setup where they don't have the whole programming set of engineers available at hand to be able to.
Right.
So we need to make sure that we are targeting them also in trying to come up with a solution. So I think one of the areas that I would specifically need some help on is trying to say, what does that small operator or small or medium operator need to get started?
Sure.
I think one of the paramount questions people coming into AutoCon was, hey, my management just signed me up to say, go figure out how to automate our network.
Right.
And I'm here and I'm hearing, oh, there are these great ways, programmatic interfaces, but how does that help me as a small operator that doesn't quite have that bandwidth, the ability to program day one, to say, this is how you can get started.
Here's a starter pack.
Yeah, here's
right?
the starter pack. Exactly,
Yeah.
right? Something that doesn't get you everything day one, but at least gets you
Sure.
a proof of concept, something you can go back to your management and say, look, if I do this, this is how much I'm able to save, or this is what I'm able to provide more quickly. So I think we need to, what I need is input on what would that starter package look like?
Okay.
Right. If I can get that feedback either in a survey or any other way, I would love to hear about it.
Let's talk about ways we can do that. Yeah, that could be a really interesting data gathering, very practical exercise for sure. Well, this is great. You obviously have a lot going on. On a personal note, how are you liking this gig? Right? You have to balance your work for your employer, but be heavily involved in this volunteer effort. How do you do that?
Yeah, and when I signed up for this, and thankfully my boss, who himself is fairly active in ITF, understands very well what the whole gig means.
Sure.
It means that I really have to balance. There's a significant amount of effort that goes into supporting my work in IETF.
No doubt.
And he's very, very supportive of it. And he's encouraged me to go all the way and try to help the community. And I think it really comes back to making sense for the company at the end of the day, because I think what AutoCon is able to achieve enables organizations like Arrcus to be able to sell more of this gear to the operators.
Sure.
Right. It's because they find it easier to deploy or easier to manage. Why would they not offer more services? Yeah.
Well, look, as we wrap this up, the name of the show is Total Network Operations. And I think there's a way that we could probably find ways to collaborate on bringing in feedback. And I would say to listeners, if there's something that's really bugging you about what's happening in your organization or the network infrastructure that you're managing, even if it doesn't fit anything Mahesh said today, let's get that to Mahesh and the team. And it's better for them to hear about options that are issues that aren't on their radar if you're finding real issues. And if you're having it over here in this corner of the world, there are probably 17 other network operators that are suffering from the same thing. Right. So Mahesh, thank you so much for being with us today. Total Network Operations listeners, thank you for tuning in. Really interested in your feedback on this topic. Happy to get anything that you feed us to Mahesh. And of course, as mentioned, we'll have information for you in the show notes for you to be able to contact him directly, but I'm happy to be an intermediary. You can drop me a LinkedIn direct message, or you can send follow-up to Packet Pushers at packetpushers.net/follow-up. Thanks very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Total Network Operations. Thanks, Mahesh.
Thank you.